Hello friends, my name is Christopher. Today I'm going to be talking about the steps necessary for repairing small cracks like this in old plaster walls. Well, I just began a renovation project for our master bedroom. Yesterday I stripped the wallpaper from this and I discovered half a dozen pretty sizable cracks. Not just vertical ones at the seam, but nice angled ones in the middle of the wall. I've fixed several cracks in our 90-year-old house throughout the years that we've owned it, so these are my techniques for small cracks. But if you have giant ones that are wall spanning, you can modify these as necessary. Well, as we begin, let's talk about the materials we're going to need. PPE for sure, goggles, and some sort of mask. This will kick off some decent dust as we're sanding, and you'd be surprised what comes out of here when you're opening that crack. We're going to need crack tape, plaster tape, fiberglass mesh, whatever you want to particularly call it. This crack is small enough that tape is going to be more than enough. As we sand this surface and apply it, it's going to give just a little bit of structural rigidity for the walls so they're not shifting as much. If you were doing a giant crack, something big in the wall of a room, you'd probably want to be drilling holes, excuse my watch, and adding adhesive for the same purpose, but we don't need to do that in this small space. A series of knives or spatulas, depending on what part of the world you're from or what background you have. I'm not going to be using the large one, I'll be using these two small ones. And then your joint compound. This has worked just fine for me. There are a lot of different options, check them out for what job you have. I also have a block sander, we'll be sanding as this dries, and a utility knife as necessary. Great, now the first step is going to be to scrape away any excess paint and enlarge the crack, which seems kind of counterintuitive and feels gross in a way, but we want to have extra space in there, more surface area for the joint compound to actually attach to and seal the crack. Okay, now that we've made our crack a little bit wider, and you saw me scraping off paint with the knives, I'm just going to take a sanding block and I'm going to rough up the surface a little bit more in preparation of the tape. This tape is adhesive on one side, just keep track of that as you're rolling it out. I'll be taping only the part that goes down the wall. From here up, there's about 16 inches of crack where the two walls meet. That's not a spot for taping. I'm going to be filling that tightly with joint compound and then kind of running a bead like I would have caulk in a bathtub, if you've done that, to mimic the curvature on the inside of the wall the rest of the way down. It'll make sense when you look at the finished product. Now we take our mud compound and we spread it on nice and thin, but evenly over this, being sure to push into the crack. I spread mine out a bit. We're going to be doing 2 coats of this, another coat after it's done sanding, where we fan this out even further. Depending on how big your crack is, you might want to be tighter on the spread at first or wider. It all depends. The mesh is going to fade away as we go through, especially after the second coat, but you can keep putting this on as thick as you need. You can kind of see that this wall has a sporadic texture through it. So when all of this is on and the crack has been filled and this is dry and ready to go, this whole wall is going to be primed with either like a Zinsser or a Kills effectively, because the plaster is going to soak up a lot of paint, so you definitely want to use a primer. And then I'm going to be painting with a sand grit in it, and so that grit will provide uniformity throughout and it'll hide tiny imperfections if you see anything. So if that's a concern of yours right now, it's fair, but remember, when this is all said and done, it's going to blend in perfectly. All right. This looks very good. Just making sure it's nice and thin. You don't want big globs of it because you are going to be sanding it when it dries. Every mud is going to be different, whether you're doing a quick set or something that's a little bit longer for work time. I'm going to let mine sit for about 3 hours as I'm doing the rest of the cracks in this closet and the next. So I'll get to this afternoon, and by that time this dark gray will have turned to a much lighter gray, almost a white, depending on the camera contrast. And I know it'll be dried to the touch, and then we'll be able to move on once this has fully dried. You don't want to rush it. Sorry about this, guys. I forgot to turn my camera mic on, of course, for this second. Here's the long story short. It dried for about 4 hours. You can see it was a nice white. I sanded it smooth and put on another very thin coat. I ended up just doing 2 coats. Do 3 or 4 or as many as you need to have the tape fade away and get a nice texture. Alright friends, another day has gone by. This final coat is perfectly dry and ready to be sanded. And that's pretty much the end of this video as far as technique is concerned when it comes to fixing small cracks. If you still see your tape under there, or it just doesn't feel right, keep adding more thin layers until you're satisfied. The next steps for me will be to sand this and then paint it. So have you had to fix big cracks like this before, either in a small space or across a great big wall? What similar techniques did you use? What different techniques? Did you have to drill holes and do adhesive like I talked about in the beginning? Do you like my technique? It works really well for me for fixing cracks and places where the corners come together. I hope it'll work for you. This is one video in a series of renovating my master bedroom. We do wallpaper, we do cracks, we do paint, we do trim. I'm building furniture. If you're interested in any of that, check out the playlist links in the description below or in the card. Subscribe if this is good to you, and good luck with your home improvement projects. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.